bang! It is another Wednesday. That means it's another hump day. And you know what that means? That means it's time for Hump Day Happy Hour with Dennis in the Know. This is your backstage pass for current trends, politics, and education in the dental world. As always, it is live. It is over a glass of wine or your favorite cocktail. And you know the routine around here. I am accompanied by my great friends, Dr. Chad Duplantis and Dr. Jennifer Bell. We are all educators, we are all dentists, and we are all business owners. Our job is to bring all of you in the know. Tonight, we've got a great show. We actually just got off. We're a couple of minutes late getting started because we were on an interview for dental economics with our guest tonight, Pamela Maragliano, and she'll be joining us in just a little bit. But for right now, I want to bring up my good buddy, Dr. Jennifer Bell, and my good buddy, Dr. Chad Duplantis. Really great show. Someone very special to all of us. A great friend, a great educator, great clinician is with us tonight. Pam Maragliano, who is the editor-in-chief at Dental Economics, is with us. Right before the show, we did an interview with her for Dental Economics, and she's going to be joining us tonight so we can pick her brain a little bit and maybe put her on the spot a little bit. So other than that, I think we have some news that we need to get through. So sit tight. We'll bring Pam on in just a few minutes. But JB, you got some news for us?
I got a few things.
Okay.
Awesome.
I hope so. You had a whole extra week to put it together.
I know, to prepare. While I was sitting in my sunshade on the beach hut, I managed to scroll through a few news items for you all. So don't worry. First off, important to note that there was a big movement at the end of January, 1st of February for military licensure portability. This was a hard-fought effort by many organized groups who were trying to help and represent military licensees and their spouses. It really was more for their spouses. As they get moved from state to state in different locations, they were running into unique challenges of trying to recredential and licensure in each state. So it opened up portability for those spouses specifically to be able to move from state to state. And as long as they're in license and good standing, no outstanding malpractice claims or litigation issues, and they have a valid licensure packet, if you will, then they're able to move from state to state and get a new license in that state and be able to practice. So that's huge for those spouses who are supporting our military men and women to be able to travel and move along as a family unit and be able to pick up where they left off with the license that they have paid dearly for in time and expertise. So that's good. There's actually a big movement for licensure portability as a collective group. This would not only apply to spouses, but also apply to all dentists to be able to move from state to state. So I think we're going to continue to see some opening up of that as well to allow dentists who are in good standing to be able to have a little bit more flexibility to move amongst the 50 U.S. states without major issues or having to relicensure, go through examination processes, et cetera. So we'll continue to stay on top of that. But I know that is definitely currently being discussed. Another interesting piece that this really applies specifically to dentists in Oklahoma, but collectively as a group, we really should be watching this particular legislation. So forgive me while I pull up some details of it because I want to represent it very clearly. But Oklahoma is proposing a piece of a language change in their laws for dentists. And I think it's worth noting the beginning on May 1st of 2025, they're proposing that dentists who are placing implants must have an implant designation included on their license. So between July 1st of 23, which is just a few months from now, and May 1st of 25, every dentist shall provide the following: a proof of minimum of 80 hours of continuing education or a certification program to place implants. Now, specialists like oral maxillofacial surgeons, prosthodontists, and endodontists, oddly, are exempted from this particular requirement. And they must continue to maintain current certification in either the American Academy of Implant Dentistry or the American Board of Oral Implantology, and that they must meet these educational requirements beginning as of July 1st of 2023. Now, this is obviously something we should be watching very closely, because anytime there is language that starts to restrict how general dentists can practice and also starts to narrow in scopes of practice, it's definitely worth discussing. I know we have specialists who watch as well. Many of the specialists that I work with are incredibly supportive of GPs doing cases within their scope of practice. And in fact, in some ways, it alleviates the burden of them doing some of the more simple, mundane root canals, implant dentistry, etc., and allows them to really focus on their specialty of the more complex procedures. We could probably have a pretty heated debate on how everyone feels about that, but I think it's worth noting that states are starting to look at specific language and a la carting different procedures and putting paradigms and restrictions around those procedures. So will this apply to endo? Will it apply to other facets of oral surgery? Will it apply to orthodontics? Will it apply to any other subspecialty that you practice that you provide services in your practice? So we'll stay tuned to that. I think this will become something that that will start moving into the lobbying and activity space for organized dentists, particularly the Academy of General Dentistry, who seems to be very motivated to continue to protect the scope of practice for general dentists. Maybe that's a plug for renewing your membership. Lastly, very interesting story. There was a tomb that was uncovered, a 17th century aristocrat, very wealthy female. She was buried and embalmed in a lead-lined tomb. And so that meant that her teeth were actually in pristine condition when they uncovered it. And interestingly enough, her skull reveals pretty aggressive acute periodontitis. So many of her roots are almost without bone coverage at all. But she had cleverly designed a gold braided wire to help ligate her teeth together and hold them in position. So even as early as the 1600s, folks were starting to lean in on the wiring of teeth in order to fixate them into position, and in her case, keep them in her head. And with that, I'll turn it back to the boys.
I love that we're supporting our troops.
Yeah.
Here is my question. Did the gold ligature wire cause some of the perio? Or was it the answer?
There is some debate in that story about whether or not the gold wire was meant to help, or did it ultimately end up hurting?
Exactly. Was that
he
the end of the
probably
story?
had one loose tooth, and then,
Can we just take it for face value? I thought it was a beautiful story.
It was a nice story, but these things always make me think.
Interestingly enough, some of the wire was actually inside the tooth. So it makes you wonder, did they cut into the tooth? And obviously anesthesia wasn't an option at that time. And, anyway, they were really wrapped very low too. If you look at the photo, and I'll post it tomorrow, they were wrapped on roots. They weren't wrapped on the crowns.
That's why I was asking if that was actually the beginning of the end, or was that? Yeah. Or was it
some of the teeth actually had piercings through. So then it makes you wonder, did the teeth actually fall out? Like, how in extreme periodontal cases, they actually would just eventually make their way out. Did she perforate them and ligate them back into this gold wire so that she could maintain her smile?
Maybe we should ask our prosthodontist about this when she comes on.
I think we should.
That's a good idea.
So, and with regard to the other thing that you talked about, it really concerns me when legislation comes into place that says you have to belong to this organization or to that organization. You know, I think it's a slippery slope. I very much appreciate that a state board wants to make sure that if a dentist is providing procedures, that they are doing it in a safe manner. You know, I understand state boards wanting to know that you've taken so much CE every year. I think that's all well and good, but I really think it's a slippery slope when we say you have to be affiliated with X organization or Y organization. That really worries me, and I really hope everyone will kind of stay on top of that. Get involved with your AGD and ADA groups, and really watch stuff like this, because it can really affect. You know, you could be, you know, doing a procedure for 10 years of your life, and then one day you can't do it because you didn't go about it in the way that they're now prescribing that you should. So anyway.
Well, and there's a pretty big financial burden that may come with that for many dentists in this particular state, Oklahoma, but we saw it happen in North Carolina with sedation dentistry as well. You know, our board came out with some pretty extensive guidelines to protect patients. We had a few deaths in the state over a very short period of time. So it created, you know, a reactionary response that was needed. And, but for those who had been doing, you know, safe sedation for 20 plus years, they no longer really qualified to be able to do that. And they had to go through, you know, a fairly expensive process to re-credential themselves to be able to continue to practice the way they were practicing.
Our guest is an amazing advocate for dentistry. I guess that's just the best way to put it. She's a former hygienist. She is a dentist. She is a prosthodontist. She has an amazing team. She runs a witch hunt in Salem, Massachusetts on a regular basis. She's got the most interesting last name in the world. She is, all kidding aside, she's an amazing person, and we're just honored to have her here. So, Pam, thank you for being here.
Hey, Pam, welcome.
Hi.
Look, she froze like this. She froze doing her queen wave, like, hello, I'm Elsa. Hi.
That was by design.
I always freeze in such an unfortunate way. It's like, you know.
And every one of those makes Instagram.
It is the truth.
They really do. It's like Logan. So one of the girls that helps us with our video editing, it never fails. I'll scroll on Instagram to see our latest one. I'm like, oh God. Oh. Because I'm like,
JB smells poop.
And then Jeff Rose.
It's so bad. So bad.
Pam, how are you?
So I'm just gonna sit here like this the whole time.
Yeah.
I'm good.
How you doing up there in Salem?
I'm all right. Yeah, doing pretty well.
Yeah, things are good. So tell us, we have a lot to cover tonight, but you got to ask us some really interesting questions earlier, and I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but I'm going to ask you, how did you get started with dental economics?
Oh my gosh. I think it was just sort of luck more than anything else. So I was with the publisher, with Endeavor Business Media. I was the editor of DentistryIQ.com, and I was the editorial director for the Dental Academy of CE. And when Chris Salerno decided to move on to Tend, my name came up. And they were probably like, she's a sucker. She'll probably say yes to this job. And here we are, almost a year and a half later.
Well, that's awesome. And I mean, it's just such a powerful publication. And you know, I had a sneak peek at what you're planning for, you know, this year and beyond. You want to tell our listeners what dental economics has in store for a while, or can you? Or
Oh, I can do that. Yeah. So it's actually really fun, and it's definitely a different thing that I've ever done before. I'm involved in every aspect of the publication, from planning the content to trying to solicit contributors, editorial advisory board, cover art, you name it. I'm kind of involved.
While we're on that topic, how many covers will I be on this year?
I mean, it depends on what you're wearing.
Okay. All right.
I'm just kidding. You
If
just
you
have
just
to pick
wait. We've
something
got
that-
pictures.
Yeah. So to get on the cover, so basically to get a cover call out. So we usually have art that's consistent with the theme of the issue. And so if there's an article that's kind of consistent with the theme, usually we'll call it out on the cover to feature the topic. So, April is coming up. That is the productive dental team when there's an inadequate amount of team members out there. So we've got a wellness issue coming, women and diversity in dentistry. And we also have clinical topics. One of my favorite months of the year is February. And our February issue just dropped. I think it's available online now. And that is cosmetic dentistry. And I even got Newton Fall to write for me.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's great.
So I try to get my heroes to write for me every February. And so far, so good. So we'll see.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And what is, would you say, so if February is kind of a clinical issue, but the vast majority of dental economics is obviously focused on the business of dentistry, correct?
Yes.
And how some of these clinical situations can impact you financially. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah. So I feel like one thing that I feel very strongly about, and I don't know if you want to call it a bias or maybe it's a fact, I don't know. I don't think you can have a good business if you don't provide good care. And so I feel that, if there's content that's going to help to promote positive outcomes or, more efficiency or proper handling of materials, that's only going to help your business. So I love the idea of mixing some clinical in with practice management, because after all, we are dentists.
Mm-hmm. And what improves the bottom line is good clinical care.
Most definitely. And your online reputation, how you're perceived by your patients, trying to get new referrals. I mean, it's all intermingled. So I really feel that there's no reason why clinical shouldn't be in there. We do have actually a practice and a science and tech section in every magazine. So there is clinical content in every magazine, but from a theme perspective, I usually try every quarter to throw a clinical theme in there.
Yeah. I mean, isn't it the same for any business? I mean, good product, good service, good business. I mean, you cover those. It really doesn't matter whether you're fixing air conditioners or fixing teeth or fixing hearts. It makes no difference. If you can offer those three things, I think you're almost destined to be successful by whatever standards you deem successful, whether it's being ultra profitable or ultra respected, right?
Most definitely. And even one of my favorite issues from last year, I think it was August, was bringing in new services into your practice. So you already have this cohort of patients that are your patients, and say you're trying to level up your bottom line, learn a new thing, learn a new skill, and bring it into your existing patient base that already trusts you and they know you and they like you and they know that you're a good dentist. So you're not recreating the wheel. And that's a great way to increase your revenue without, other than learning a new skill and getting comfortable and training your team, which is obviously not a small feat depending on what the endeavor is. That's a great way to increase your profitability in your practice without having to do any major heavy marketing or bring in a million new patients.
Pam, how do you keep your pulse on you, or collectively dental economics as a group? How do you keep your pulse on both the current things that will help lift up or educate or inspire clinicians to do, different things in their practice, but then also forecasting and looking forward to understand economic landscape? And how do you help prepare doctors? How do you keep your pulse on the ground, essentially?
I feel like, I mean, for starters, I'm a practice owner. So I'm just like every other dentist out there. So the struggles that I have, I'm pretty sure other people have a similar situation going on. So I feel if it's relevant to me and if it's something that's going to help my practice, it's got to be able to help somebody else's practice. And so we're all kind of going through the same things. And I think paying attention to what's going on out there. So I read magazines, I read journals. Obviously, you scope out what's going on social media, hang out with you guys. I mean, I think just sort of being around, going to conferences, you'll kind of get a sense of what's going on and where the trends are. But obviously, there's certain things that are just so in your face a problem right now, like staffing and inflation and some of the economic issues that are going on that, you'd be crazy not to cover them and try to offer some semblance of a solution.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of which, I'm sorry, Jeff.
No, go ahead, Chad.
No, I mean, there's a lot of, we've talked about social media. We've talked about business decisions. We've talked about, dental economics. What are your thoughts on, there's a lot of promotion or conversation on social media where people are just throwing out, asking for business suggestions, offering business advice. What are your thoughts on that?
How long do we have?
I know.
As long as you need.
I kind of thought you might like this
I've
topic.
got this much wine left.
Yeah, we're good.
We have 5 minutes. Okay.
5 minutes.
She's quick, man. She can hang. She
Hey,
can
Jeff.
hang.
Jeff, can you pour some in there?
That would be so cool if you could make that happen.
Thanks, man.
We have to work on that.
Yeah, we'll have to figure that one out.
Oh my gosh. You need a Richard. Anyway.
I do, Rich. Where's Rich?
Meatloaf.
We need the meatloaf now.
He's going to be like, what do you want? All right. So asking business advice on social media. I find you can ask anything on social media. I mean, do it. Ask a question that what the answer is, like what the fact is in your heart and soul. Throw it out there, and you're going to get a whole gamut of answers that are out there. Some are super relevant and accurate, and some are just like, what? So I think that, a lot of times if you reach out to social media for something specific like business advice, career advice, some of the information you'll get might be relevant to your situation, but some of it might be so far out of left field that it's just wrong, or it could be detrimental to your situation. I feel like there's a lot of really great resources out there, and not to plug DE, but I have to say, I've never read DE more than I do now, obviously. But I can say that the contributors are incredible, and some of the coaches and the financial people and the consultants and the dentists that are contributing to DE are legit. And I can tell you, in the year and a half of me being editor, the practice owner that I was a year and a half ago versus who I am now are two totally different people, and I have to attribute that to DE. And one of the craziest things out there is it's free. It's free to subscribe to the magazine. It's free to subscribe to our digital magazine. So I don't see why that, people don't reach out and get, that is freaking awesome right there.
That's enough. Thanks, Jeff.
So yeah, I mean, I just feel like the resources are out there and you can get some great advice. A lot of our contributors are super approachable. I don't know. I think that there's a lot to be said for just, reading information and reaching out to people that actually are experts in that arena.
I agree.
That just happened.
That did just happen. But hey, I want to say that you are 100% right. And there was something that popped up today. And one of the biggest problems that I see too is that somebody asks a legitimate business question on social media, and then some, you know what, has to come in and just bash the question. Is it insecurity? I don't care. But, especially when somebody posts anonymously, that to me is saying, hey, I don't have the courage. I don't have the gusto. Maybe I'm embarrassed by this, but I really want to ask a legitimate question. And then somebody's got to just come in and just lay down the law. And this is the way that it is. Drop the mic. I'm out. Don't respond to the replies or anything like that. But people can just really get bashed, and it can really hurt somebody in getting not necessarily the wrong advice, but just really unbacked advice and just purely biased advice. So,
and it's taking advantage of the vulnerability of the person asking a question. Like, you can't ask a question anymore. It's crazy. And so I don't know. I just think that there's something to be said, like you guys have done, to create a community of people that hopefully don't feel like they have to be anonymous and know that they can ask a question without getting destroyed for having a question. And, I feel like, gosh, you guys know how it is. When you have close friends, you ask questions, you tell them stories, the good, bad, and the embarrassing. And we all have those stories. Not that you have to throw them out there on social media, but I feel like, they're not reaching out because they already know the answer. They're reaching out because they have a concern. And we're not taught in dental school to be business people. We're sort of, you buy a practice, you're kind of learning on the fly. Hopefully there's a mentor that you have available. I didn't have a mentor. I didn't get along with the person I bought my practice from at all. So I sort of bought it and was like, let's see what happens. And it's, and I've just tried to do things the way, treat people the way I want to be treated, treat my patients like their family, like do all the things that I believe that you're supposed to do, but also hope that at the end of the day, the practice is profitable. That's not a great plan.
But you know what, though? In the business that we're in, I'm a firm believer that if you do what you just said, the business is going to come. You really have to be, a manager of money at that point in time, because if you treat people correctly, you're going to get the business. You have to just be able to ask, receive, collect, and apply appropriately. And I think that, you're going to build it. You're going to build it well. You may not be the best business person. I'd have no clue. You probably are incredible, better than me. But, if you have those principles, I think that there's a lot to be said for that. And a lot of people don't.
Well, I think that sometimes, I can be completely honest with you. A lot happened to me during the pandemic. So it was the first time that I had time to just sort of sit back and reflect. We're always like seeing patients and making decisions and doing all the things and, getting through the week, the month, the year, and not really having that time to sit back and really think about, is this the practice I imagined? Is my reality kind of the fantasy that I had back when I bought my practice in 2014? And I realize if I have to now not work for 3 months, crazy things are going to happen. But I realized I wasn't happy. And the vision that I had for my practice and what my practice was in reality were like two totally different things in the worst way. And I just sort of like had this, my own little come to Jesus moment with myself. And I was like, you know what? I'm tired of apologizing for who I am. And I'm tired of making myself so uncomfortable for the comfort of the team around me that aren't even performing the way I want them to perform. And so I decided to get rid of my entire clinical team during the pandemic. And it was just like, and if patients aren't here for me, then you're not here for my practice and you can go somewhere else. And what was so interesting is that I surrounded myself with people that had a similar vision and a similar goal and a similar level of drive and caring for patients. And my practice has like blown up since. And I just think, gosh, I wish I just had that trust in myself. I don't know, like 6 years ago, or, 9 years ago at this point. But I think that when you're a new practice owner, you're just sort of trying to get by and trying not to lose patients and trying to, not lose staff and do all of those things where you could lose yourself. And I think that,
Mhm.
yeah, I think like starting with a vision and starting with what your mission is and surrounding yourself with those that will support it will set you up for success.
I don't even know, Pam, that it's even a thing of being, newer in it as much as it is, I always say, being a dentist is like owning a McDonald's and also being the guy in the back flipping the burgers, or the gal in the back flipping the burgers. You're flipping the burgers the whole time. And while you're flipping the burgers, you got to make sure that the people on the registers are ringing it up right. And while you're doing that, you got to oversee all the payments and the loans, and that the building is staying clean. And so it's really hard to ever get that kind of perspective until you actually have some time off. I mean, you can say that now, but I don't know if it's that you didn't have the business prowess or that you weren't being true to yourself. It's just that we're so busy as dentists flipping the burgers, metaphorically, but that's what we're doing the whole time. And it's just so hard to have that introspective time to really say, am I getting everything I want out of this practice?
It's so true. And I guess it really depends on, there's a few different ways you can think about it. You can think about it from a clinical approach, a business approach, staffing, HR, I mean, financial, whatever it is. But yeah, I think that, taking that time, I really think it's important. I mean, gosh, we all were off for 2-3 months, depending on what state you're in, and we're all still standing, thankfully. Taking that time and really reflecting and making sure that this endeavor, I mean, for most of us, it's the biggest investment we'll ever make. And
So I think we need to introduce dental sabbaticals.
Yeah.
I really think that, and I'm not saying, I mean, I'm kind of joking, but I'm also kind of not joking, because I think we all need a little bit of that introspective time to say, okay, here's where I am because I've made so many decisions on the fly, and because you've had to. And so I really think that could be a healthy thing. And something maybe we ought to talk about is, is it smarter to schedule, like some people talk about 3 weeks on, longer weeks, take a full week off to really sit down and focus and think and pay attention to your business, because a half a day here or a Saturday there doesn't really cut it.
Yeah, that's true, and I think that the pandemic really just provided us a lot of introspect, and it's all in how we used it. But I would say that we all came back more charged than we've
Yeah.
ever been in our
Ready to go.
careers, because here we are. We're not just coming out of school where it doesn't matter if we make $25,000 or $50,000. We came out like, holy crap, we got to catch up, and we were rested, we were charged, we were ready to go. And our patients were too,
absolutely. I think, it's kind of weird that I say it this way, but I identify with being a dentist. And when that was taken away, even for a temporary period of time, and I always have other jobs. It's not like I didn't have other things to do. I shot a million videos for DentistryIQ at the time, but I wasn't treating patients. And there was a loss there. There was something.
There is a loss.
I remember, now I don't give two, what's about football. And I remember my first emergency patient. I was like, so what do you think Tom Brady's doing? And I'm like trying to hold a conversation about the Patriots just because it was a patient on the phone.
Yeah.
And I think that, there's something to be said for, really valuing what we do. And, I promised myself I would never take it for granted ever again. I know sometimes we wake up and don't really want to go to work, or we're tired or whatever. But I also really wanted to make the environment that I work as special as it could be for myself, my team, and my patients.
I
love
like
it.
normalizing the sabbatical. I think it does so many things. You can, being able to take that time to learn, onboard new things, like, and actually give it the time and attention it needs to get it onboarded successfully in your practice. You want to bring on I brought 3D printing in during COVID because that was a time I could dedicate towards learning the technology and be successful at it. But also just because mental health is so challenging in our field, and we continue to see story after story of folks taking their own lives under, different circumstances, but you can't help but wonder how much the pressure of what we do on the hamster wheel we're on a continual basis, without taking that reset time, mental health time, even if it's just to cook or do hobby gardening or whatever it is that helps you sort of escape from the demands of the day-to-day that we do. I think we should make that a more comfortable space to be okay, and have patients be okay for just their own doctor's well-being as well.
That's what Jeff and I were doing during the pandemic. We were cooking and hobby gardening.
I knew it.
Exactly. And Pam, we shot some videos of our own. We just can't talk about them publicly. Yeah.
Right.
Remember that one, Jeff?
I do. Oh, the humanity.
Yeah.
Pam, I'm open to do podcasts if you have any that you want me to jump to. I'm happy to do them.
I know, I was going to say, that's a big job for you, managing these two. It's like wrangling cats.
So what do you see
as
as coming next for dental economics? Where do you see things going? I mean, we've been in the big shutdown. We got into, a lot of social media and virtual learning, and what are your goals for dental economics? Where do you see things going?
Jeff, you didn't hear that you and I were just hired by Dental Economics to do their video shoots?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you totally are. Yes.
Yeah.
We pay really well.
I don't think we have enough liability insurance for that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's going to take a hell of a law team.
Yeah.
We can't show them. Sorry, everybody. Oh my gosh. So where's DE going? Well, I can say a few things. There's this push right now about DSOs, and what does that mean? And are we all going to sell our practice to a DSO and get these multiples of EBITDA and all of this? And the answer is probably not, depending on your practice. And so I think one thing we're starting to put more and more information out about there is about DSOs and what that looks like and what those partnerships can be. They're not all horrible. They're not all terrible for patients and for staff. Some of them can actually be quite good. So I think trying to help people navigate what that looks like, I think is really important. We have we have our conference coming up, which is really exciting in October. That conference is called the Secrets of Successful Dentists for Creating Wealth. So I thought it was important for us to figure out what we should do with our money. I feel like so many patients think we have all this money, and some people do and some people don't, but not everybody knows what to do with it. And dentists retire Airplane. That's a great investment.
That's the only reasonable thing I can see.
Most definitely. Yes.
Timeshares.
Oh, and timeshares. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Airplanes and timeshares. Absolutely.
Yes. You heard it here, folks.
Which Jeff has owned both. So.
For the absolute worst advice, go to Dinks.
And crypto from my Instagram.
FTX, put it all in.
Sidekick. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So, I feel like dentists, it's actually crazy. There's a few statistics that are actually kind of horrible. One is 4% of dentists retire financially free, which is terrible.
That's crazy.
Wow.
And we tend to retire about 8 years after the average American. So why? And what can we do about that? And I feel like, it's never too late to start thinking about your future. And I also thought that it was important to talk about it. And so our conference is really all about that, helping
Yeah.
people get a legit plan going and get some skills so that they can harness their wealth so that they can retire someday, whether you're 2 years out or 30 years out, that this is something that we have to focus on.
You bring up a really good point, and I'm going to go back just a little bit. I love everything that you talked about, but you mentioned DSOs, and that is just such a hot topic right now. You don't have to name anybody on the show, but do you have somebody that you would recommend that might be good to speak to our audience about DSOs and maybe somebody who's not necessarily affiliated with them, but understands them as to what's good, what's bad, what to look for, what to look out for?
Absolutely. I have a few people. So why don't we talk offline and see what angle you'd like to take with it, maybe all the angles, and you can invite them to come on. I'm sure they'd be really happy to share that with you.
I would love that. I think that's just such a hot topic right now. And I think, there's so much emotion over that acronym that it's just crazy.
There is, and I think there's a lot of misconception. And I think
a lot of misconception about EBITDA.
About EBITDA, forget it.
Yeah.
But also
DSOs, but EBITDA in particular. Yeah.
Oh yeah. And this whole concept of, regardless of the size of your practice, you're just going to be able to sell to a big DSO and make all this money and, live high on the hog. And that's not the case. And not every practice is a candidate to be partnering with a DSO. There's certain criteria that most of them are looking for. So, if that's one of your goals, then you have to prepare for that. You can't just sort of, go through your career and hope for the best, and you need to certainly create goals and plan for that and have, a pretty sweet package for them to want to take over your practice.
It's funny. I have an interesting. I'm sorry, Jennifer. Go ahead.
No, go finish.
No. So I just have an interesting perspective that I really see a big opportunity coming again for the private practitioner, for the independent practitioner, for the small group, for the people that really don't fit into that mold of selling to a DSO. I think that there's a recipe for many of us who really don't want to ever fit that mold it's not as easy as it sounds. You don't just call up a DSO and say, hey, here's my practice, come buy it. Okay, great. We're going to give you 8 times EBITDA and, you're going to live happily ever after and retire a rich person. No, there's a lot of stipulations that come along with that. You're going to have to work for so long. You're going to have to, commit so much time to them. And you're going to have to be an employee and you're going to have to conform to a lot of the things that fit into that corporate entity. And what I really think is that with all the push and all the movement towards corporate dentistry, I think we have created this vacuum now for just really great small groups and independent practitioners to really thrive, because there's always going to be that market that recognizes that and still wants that real, person-to-person, relationship-based type of practice.
That is very true. So last year's conference, Roger Levin spoke, and he was forecasting that reimbursements, even from premier third-party payers, is on the decline. And after enough time, basically, reimbursements are all going to be pretty consistent with that of a PPO. Many of us hear that and we're sort of a little jarred by it, and we're a little upset and maybe a little angry when you hear something like that. But that business model can work for some practices. And so that could work. But you did say something that was really important, and the word was great. So the one place where I think people will thrive is if you have the business model that's consistent with, participating in a lot of PPOs, and you can, drill them and fill them and make that work. And that works for some people. But then there'll also be the smaller, more boutique practices, and you have to make your practice stand out and be special. The practices that are going to struggle are kind of the middle of those. Not quite a PPO practice, not quite a boutique practice, but kind of live in the land of mediocrity. They're going to struggle. So now's an opportunity to really make your practice stand out, whether it means leveling up your clinical skills, maybe dropping the crappy PPOs or something like that, but really making your practice be different and really stand out and special so that you will weather these things and you can thrive when you've got DSOs around every corner of your, in your location.
JB, I'm sorry, I cut you off before. So
no, it was a fantastic discussion. And I just wanted to applaud Pam as well. We hear a ton about new dentists, dental school debt, and all the challenges for those coming into the profession. But I love DE's renewed focus on those in the profession and what their financial journey looks like as they navigate that. And I don't think collectively as a profession we spend enough time educating, informing, empowering, giving great tips and feedback to those who are, my age, Chad's age, Jeff's age, and even younger than I am, on how to strategically work their business to their advantage, work their investments to their advantage, plan for that retirement, and that selling your practice is not going to be the way that you will retire. And how do you start running your small business like a true business that will see you from the beginning of your career to the end? So I really was just going to applaud you for a renewed focus for those who are actively in the trenches needing support.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And honestly, that type of content is for everybody. It
That's
really
right.
won't start early enough. I remember in dental school, they're like, oh yeah, you're, already 27 years old. You're behind the game at this point. Like, behind the game, I don't even have an income.
You okay, Chad?
That was a
Good.
big applause from you, Jeff.
Y'all just have an earthquake after the ice storm?
I was wondering.
Carry on. Sorry.
So yeah, it's just one of those things. We're taught that in dental school, like you're already late to the game to save for retirement, but we're not at that point in our lives where we feel like we can. And also, I don't know about you, but I feel the same way as I did when I was in high school. So I'm like, what do you mean I'm going to retire someday? Like, I'm too young for that, which is not true, but it's how I feel. So I think that, the sooner you can prioritize that, the easier your future is going to be. So, I feel like if a new dentist even gleans a little bit of advice here, it's that you should be thinking about how to set some money aside, start thinking about retirement, think about investments. A 401k is not going to get you very far anymore. It's not the only way to go. And so there's other things that are probably going to be a bigger part of your plan that will help you retire when you want to, not when you have to.
Not to mention that's all taxable when it comes out. And you've got to really think about that. It's, whatever it is that you're going to be pulling out. Maybe your tax rate will be a little bit lower than what it is now, but it's still going to take a significant chunk out of what it is that you're taking out.
Well, I'm just banking on Social Security.
I'm banking on my airplane just bringing in a ass ton of money.
And I'm banking on Bitcoin.
So airplanes, crypto, and fine cars, man.
I think that's a lecture. I think that is a lecture title. Airplanes,
it's kind of surprising that
crypto.
we weren't asked to give. It's really surprising we weren't asked to give the keynote for that conference. We have really good advice.
Hey guys, we are over. I know Pam is tired. I know for a fact that we're going to have Pam back on again before we go, could we get another shot of Senorita?
She left.
That little.
Here,
dang it.
this is what she looks like, though.
Oh,
There you
Senorita.
go.
She is.
All
Yeah.
right. Well,
And can we finally get that meatloaf from Rich?
He left too.
damn it. Damn it. Well, Pam, we look forward to seeing you in Chicago, and we're going to carry this conversation on to a couple months down the road. We'd love to have you back if you would be willing to do so.
For sure.
Anytime. Say the word.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here, and we'll go ahead and close it out. And I guess with that, I will just say that the push for Dentists in the Know will always be airplanes, timeshares, and crypto. With those three investments, you can be set for life. Forget your 401k. Add in a little Social Security, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah.
So,
There's
anyhow,
a get
everybody,
rich quick scheme.
Disclaimer, this is bad
I don't know
advice.
about
Yeah.
prosperity for
that
anyone
was actually
listening.
a joke. All kidding aside, while we are still working, remember, treat people like you want to be treated. Give them the best care possible. Work for their loyalty and their trust, and just do the best you can. And that will serve you for years to come. And that is the truth. So with that being said, thanks everybody. Thanks, Pam, Jeff, JB. Great seeing you all. And until next week, we'll see you again.
Good night, gang.
Good night.
And that wraps up another podcast for Dentists in the Know. On behalf of Dr. Jennifer Bell, Dr. Chad Duplantis, and myself, remember that we've got a great profession, so let's make it a great day, dinks.